are wrong. I am wrong. He is wrong. She is wrong. They are wrong. We are wrong. Seriously. 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 Wrong.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Seriously Wrong podcast.
Yeah, we're the Wrong Boys. I'm Sean, and
I am Aaron. Sorry to cut you off if you were going to say my name for me.
I was, but no, you totally, you own it. I'm not complaining.
Okay, good.
And he's Aaron. Sorry, I just couldn't. It's bubbling inside.
I had to finish. So, won't somebody please think of the children? I'm asking you, won't they?
No, I think they will.
You think somebody will?
No, I think they will.
Okay, so that answers my question.
Think of the children. Yeah, definitely. Here, let me just try thinking of the children for a second. Oh, interesting. Toys. It's a child's life. I just remembered it. I thought of it.
Yeah, I was a child at one point myself, and I do remember really enjoying toys.
Yeah, I don't mean to stereotype, but...
Yeah, I wonder if there are kids who dislike all toys.
They're very serious. They have like a little like briefcase, have a laptop in it. They're like, no, I maintain my email inbox. I don't have toys anymore.
There's no games on this computer. That would turn it into a toy.
I pay for the professional word processor suite so I can draft my letters to friends and acquaintances.
Sorry, it's being a bit absurd. Obviously, when people say think of the children, they're imploring you to think of the political impacts of something on children.
Oh, you want me to think of the children in a political context to make sort of ethical and social deliberations using them as an ethical nucleus.
Yeah, sort of recommend how we should set society up, how we should keep it the same, what should we change,
Right.
with the end goal of, supporting children, giving children the best life, the best shot at a good future, etc., that kind of thing. Not just like anything to do with children. Oh, think of the children so that we can think of how best to crush them. I guess some people end up doing that, but I think it's usually
Think of the children as a source of food.
Yeah, think of the children as like how much meat if we were to turn them into nuggets.
Child nuggets. It's the food of the future. See, that's where I got confused, because I thought you were telling me to think of the children like in general and just sort of remember their characteristics. And
yeah,
that's why I
toys,
came up with
the only thing you came up with. You didn't even think of school or play without toys, like
learning.
Imaginative play.
Well, that's an interesting thing about play too. Is like that kid pretending to be a businessman with the word processor and all that sort of stuff. Like,
it kind of turns the briefcase into a toy.
yeah, it's a type of play because this hypothetical kid would be like trying on the role of a business person, adult, or whatever.
Unless they're literal employed boss baby type. Like, they're not just playing at being an executive. Like, they're actually doing it.
It's kind of like when you have a political system based around kings, where sometimes like a child becomes king. It's like a 9-year-old inherits a Fortune 500 company and they let him run it, and it's called Kid Boss. And it's a 1990s family adventure movie, not to be confused with Boss Baby.
Yeah, I'm unsure the origins of how a baby became a boss in Boss Baby. I haven't seen it, but...
I think it's a man who's transformed into a baby.
Oh, so it's not even a real baby?
Yeah, man, I'm disappointed too. Yeah, no, they don't trust babies to run big companies in these DreamWorks movies. It's disgusting. I want to see a real boss baby.
I just assumed I was getting the story of how a baby came to be a boss.
No.
Not how a boss came to be a baby. That's way less interesting.
Yeah, they should call it Boss Adult Man in the Body of a Baby.
Yeah.
For accuracy. Boss Baby. The movie I want to see is Worker Baby.
The story of how a worker is turned into a baby, or the story of how a baby becomes a worker? One seems like strange hijinks. The other seems like potentially an interesting developmental examination of how we turn babies into workers.
Right, yeah. Maybe the whole plot is there's two different types of baby workers and the bosses make them fight with each other. So some of you were employed as babies. Some of you are adults who were turned into babies to become baby workers. And so I'll play you against each other to keep your wages down. Stories about overcoming that difference. But yeah, thinking of the children politically, I think there is an ethical clarity that can come in some instances of thinking about the impacts of social policies on children. Like, for example, poverty having a disproportionate impact on children. That's a good rhetorical strategy. It's also got a real ethical basis to it. Like, you can say, think of the children to some sort of absurd or ridiculous or far right regressive end, and that definitely happens. But the overall premise of thinking of the children in politics is worthwhile, even though it's sort of primarily associated with, like satanic panic and like
Right. Well, yeah, I think children are uniquely vulnerable, and so most political issues, like you mentioned poverty, most political issues that affect everyone are going to have disproportionate impacts on children. Like poverty sucks for everybody. Like say you're not getting enough food or you're not getting enough of anything you need is bad no matter what age you are. But children developmentally are more vulnerable and also like need more of certain things. So not getting enough of it is going to have a disproportionate impact on them. There's like a real logical basis to it on that level. But yeah, unfortunately, it is used a lot of the time for rhetorical effect on arguments that are like framed around like bigoted assumptions, things that don't actually help kids. But like if we're talking about thinking of the children in terms of making sure everybody gets enough food to eat, talking about thinking of the children and making sure that everyone has access to health care, that everyone has access to education, stimulating environments, to fun, to all the things that people need to live good lives, I'm definitely in favor of that. Like,
yeah, we should take the impacts or potential impacts on developing minds really, really seriously in politics. And we should actively think about the ways that the society that we want to create and the pathways towards getting to that society that we endorse and participate in are made in ways that are friendly and accommodating and make space for both children and their parents. In that sense, I think thinking of the children is an absolute political priority.
yeah.
But they just let anybody say, think of the children these days.
Yeah, and I think, partially because it is such a valid concern. And, like, I think we all, like, want to protect kids. Like, it hits an emotional punch for most people. It also makes it a really effective rhetorical strategy, that it makes it an attractive rhetorical strategy to people who, want to use it for invoking in people not, like, real dangers that children face, but, like, fake dangers in order to uphold hierarchical norms that hurt people. Oh, that fire's looking a little low. Maybe I'll just toss an extra log on there. You want to sit out here for a little while more still, right?
Oh, yeah, it's super nice. You can see the stars and all that.
Beautiful.
Really cool.
Out here camping.
Hey, so I was reading something online the other day. It's just, the world is out of control, man. I try to take a step back, try to like look kind of cynically at it all, you know me, but
yeah. There's a lot of weird stuff in the news lately, definitely.
So apparently in the school in Toronto, they put litter boxes in the bathroom so students who could identify as cats could use the litter boxes instead of toilets and urinals. I mean, the world's going upside down, man.
Yeah, I really don't think that's true. It sounds like something that was made up for clickbait, maybe.
Well, you can't.
Sometimes they just want to get people all riled up and be like, "Oh, look at what they're doing to children," but it's actually just like not true.
Like, listen,
happens a lot.
That's not the only one. Like, a teacher was fired in Victoria for not using 15-syllable pronouns that use non-English characters.
Right, yeah, unstandard phonemes that Anglos are bad at pronouncing. I saw that story,
They were fired for not being able to pronounce it correctly.
No, yeah, I saw that story.
15-syllable pronoun.
And I looked it up, and it actually wasn't true at all. That just didn't happen. The teacher actually didn't even claim that. They said something else, but someone misunderstood it and wrote an article. And then all these YouTube channels spread it around, and it just literally wasn't even close to the truth.
Well, the thing that makes it believable is that these days that is close to the truth.
It's really not, though. I mean, like, I know what you're saying. There's a lot of stuff happening in the world, so it's like...
You know what they're doing in California now?
What is it?
Mandatory bisexuality. They're holding kids back unless they demonstrate that they're becoming more bisexual over time until they reach 50-50.
That just really doesn't seem true.
It's true. Yeah, look it up. Look it up.
I think the whole
I read an entire article about it. And I saw,
LGBT thing, it's usually just about accepting people how they are, not trying to make them more bisexual or less, or more gay or less
I'm
gay.
telling
or
you,
more
man, that's not
straight.
the half of it.
I feel like
These days?
your perception on what's going on these days is a bit skewed, I think, because you seem to keep making these same mistakes in the same direction.
Wait, I mean, the world's so wild these days, you can't tell the difference between lies and the truth. I think, if anything, that says something about society that I couldn't tell whether or not it's the difference between satire and reality is just blurring day by day. I think that says something about society.
Yeah, well, it says something about society and that there's so many fake stories like this out there that you would think things like that are happening.
You know, in Wisconsin, they had prostitutes talking to 5-year-old children at Career Day about how prostitution is empowering.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true.
Pretty sure it is.
Did you read that on the same website where you read all these other things? Because
Yeah, websites, pages.
yeah, I feel
I'm not. Who's tracking? That's like details.
yeah, I might not always remember that too, but I would like look back to the original source, kind of where it came from, because I just don't think it just seems really unlikely that they would be at Career Day.
You know, in New Zealand, they're teaching children that 2 + 2 = racist.
Okay, that one it's definitely not true, because
No,
2
they're-
+ 2 = 4,
No,
and
not anymore.
I guarantee you every math class that exists
That's what I was saying.
is still teaching that currently, and there aren't classes teaching that adding two numbers together equals a concept
That's what you would think.
of oppression. It's not just what I would
but
think, it's what I
These
continue
days,
to think.
excuse me, these days,
I just feel like a lot of these things are being spread by people who want to take advantage of our natural inclination to protect children, to sort of spread a political agenda and to kind of tar progressives with like all these things that they're saying that are happening that aren't happening, or they're like altering details, overblowing things. They're just, because there are discussions about racism you can have in math class, but it's not 2 + 2 = racism. Or about math class, or ways that like math historically, like I feel like you're being misled. No, I don't. I should say this stronger than that. You are being misled. I'd feel like a bad friend if I didn't tell you that.
Oh yeah. Well, no, I'll keep that.
Maybe keep running these by me. When you find them, just ask me true or false. Or I don't know if you believe me, but
In Winnipeg, Manitoba, milkmen must only deliver soy milk from now on.
do milkmen even still exist?
I believe so in Winnipeg, but they totally are forbidden from distributing milk these days.
Can you get
Just pure soy.
So it's just a soy milk distribution service.
Yeah,
I mean, it's probably not true, but if it is true, it seems fine.
I read about
Like,
it.
can you still buy cow milk at the grocery store?
I think so, yeah, but the milkmen don't do it anymore because part of this weird woke agenda.
Yeah, there's just anytime you see something that says woke agenda, it's probably not true.
You say I'm being misled, but I've read about it on one day, I read about it on another day, I read about it on another day, and eventually, over enough days, I've read about that so many different days that it's one of the main things I've read about because I've read about it a lot, and it's
Yeah, I mean, it's
all my other contexts.
Yeah, I feel like it does say something about society that you can kind of enter into this bubble where you keep seeing these things over and over. Like, I haven't heard of almost any of these because I don't pay attention
your own
to
research.
those. Well, I mean, when I hear about these types of things, I do my own research, and then I find out they're not true. But
Well, if you trust the news. Like, if you trust the news
no,
to
I
tell
just
you what's
trust
really
my own
going on.
research. I'm saying you have to do your own research.
Right. That's what
Because the news isn't talking about these things at all, so
You're trusting what the news is not saying. You're saying the news didn't report on it, therefore it couldn't possibly be happening. And no offense.
No, that's not what I said. I said I researched them, and I found they're not happening, and the news doesn't talk about them, which, if they weren't happening, kind of lines up really well, right? Like,
Yeah,
they
but that
wouldn't
also says something about our society. If the news isn't covering it,
isn't covering things that aren't happening.
well, if the news isn't covering something that is happening,
Right, but
then
that's
that's
different
something
from
you
what we're
got to look
talking
into.
about now.
No, that's not what that's what you're talking about. What I'm talking about is the news not talking about something that is happening, and that's a story in itself.
That would be a story.
And
yeah,
that's
if
why
that
you
was happening. But
need-
that's all these examples you've given. I'll bet you.
That's why you need independent researchers to journalist the journalists.
I'll bet you $250 that none of the things you said just now were true.
Well, anyway, I mean, who cares?
Maybe enough about politics. We'll put a pin in that. Come back to it
Maybe
later.
start talking about religion, you filthy Protestant.
Oh yeah, I can debate your Catholic ass all night. Let's throw another log on the fire. You want to think about the children? Teaching them Catholicism? Disgusting.
Yeah, why don't you just submit to the divine authority of the Pope, and then we'll talk, okay?
Yeah, a fat chance.
Oh, where's your Pope? I can't find your Pope. Oh, what, you guys don't have a Pope? Oh, well, weird. Fucking Protestants, man.
That's actually a strength of Protestantism. We're a diverse bunch. But
There's kind of like a long history of this sort of argument being used for different, hierarchical, discriminatory, and bigoted causes, right? Like they use think of the children arguments with women getting the vote, like that women voting would take away time to care for their children.
yeah, there's
So think of the children. We shouldn't allow women to vote so they can focus on children instead of participating in deliberative first past the post democracy every 4 years to pick between two people who are cousins.
Yeah, I was just reading about that too. It's so because it sounds so ridiculous to be like, oh, think of the children. We can't let women vote. But you just connect a few other weird hierarchical, like women should be in the home, should be taking care of children. It's still ridiculous anyway, because as you point out, it doesn't take that long to vote. It's not like I'm not saying women should be in the house raising kids anyway, but even if you think that, it doesn't make sense, even within their own argument, that this would somehow hurt their ability to do that if they were also voting. Literally makes zero sense, but it's an argument that packs an emotional punch that people used at the time. I was reading this article in The Atlantic from 1903 saying why women don't want suffrage. That was the title of the article, or something very close to that, making, amongst other arguments, this point that they should be taking care of children, so it'll hurt kids.
And then I guess there would also probably be think of the children arguments used for integration in the U.S., when they stopped having segregation between white and black students or white and black businesses.
Yeah, there's just a lot of generalized racist, letting black kids into white schools will make the schools worse. They'll behave poorly and degrade the educational level, et cetera, et cetera. There's also really weird specific things I saw. There's this thing about how white girls couldn't use the bathrooms anymore because there were black girls in there. It was I guess implied just that it was scary for them or something. But then there was also things about diseases being spread. There were that also came up with pool segregation, they're dirty, so they'll spread disease. It's just racist shit. But if you frame it around kids, our kids use those pools. These are our daughters in these bathrooms. It hits people in the gut where they're like, oh no, I don't want kids catching diseases. I guess we better keep society racially segregated. But if you just say oh, we have to keep society racially segregated, think of the children. It literally makes no sense unless you start connecting these weird dots.
Yeah, and I guess it would be the late 80s and 90s where you have think of the children arguments being applied to depicting gay people in media, or having public figures who are openly gay. That's a 90s thing, I guess, the public figure stuff, depiction probably a little earlier.
Yeah, I mean, that's still going on now to some extent.
But there'd be a time where people would be think of the children. If little girls see Ellen DeGeneres is a lesbian on her sitcom, or is even a straight woman on a sitcom played by a lesbian, then that's going to give them irreconcilable confusion about the world. And they're going to be like a Pokemon who's got a confusion buff just hitting themselves uncontrollably.
Yeah, well, there's the Anita Bryant 1980s Save the Children campaign, which is one of the main examples of the anti-gay Save the Children thing from that time period, was about specifically banning gay people from being teachers, because if they are in the classroom, they'll be recruiting children. So they use this term recruitment. Like the Anita Bryant thing is homosexuals can't reproduce, so they have to recruit, which also doesn't make sense because, I mean, I'm sure our listeners all know this, but, you know, conversion therapy doesn't work. Like people try to recruit gay kids into being straight all the time. It doesn't work. But like keeping gay teachers out of school, not even like that they're going to like, because now there's a culture war on Think of the Children of like curriculums that acknowledge gay people exist. That's not even like curriculum. It's just like, oh yeah, if they're there, they'll go after the kids. And people are like, oh no, I don't want my kids being gone after by gay men in classrooms. I think like having positive representations of gay people in media wasn't a thing that came up a lot in the 80s. But so you're probably right that it's more of a 90s Ellen DeGeneres time period concern.
I think I remember that happening too around like sex ed curriculums. Like Think of the Children is another play. Like all the evidence over time shows that it's really beneficial to teach children about the basics of safe sex and the risks of like young pregnancy and disease transmission and stuff like that. Like it's really beneficial to not have an abstinence only education, but like there's a historic culture war that's still going on today. But I remember that being like debated when I was a kid about whether or not it should be taught in schools.
Yeah, and also just in general, like I learned sex ed, but like the current culture war around gay and trans kids, mostly trans kids, is just around like telling kids that it's okay if you love someone your same gender, or if you don't feel like you're the gender you were assigned at birth. That now they've taken this concept of recruiting and swapped it out for the term grooming, which already had a definition beforehand of like eroding children's boundaries to start a sexual relationship after they turn 18. And now they're using that term to describe like accepting trans kids in school at all, like making it a normal thing that what the school's position is that trans kids are real. You should use their name. You should use their pronouns. Trans people are real. So if there's a kid who is trans, like you treat them with the same respect as everybody else. And this is like unleashed the current wave of Think of the Children rhetoric in like, yeah, major. And it's like, it's such a small thing, but like, or not such a small thing, but like, it's such a powerful thing to have like authority people in your life saying like, you know, it's okay to be who you are. But there's just like, yeah, all this fear around like the idea that like kids are going to be turned trans.
Yeah, like there's people flipping out over stuff like having a rainbow flag up in the classroom. This is like really, really small stuff, and it's getting blown up. And
yeah, I got caught up on saying it was small because I'm like, well, it isn't small to the kids who would actually feel left out if they were in a non-accepting environment. Like, I would have loved to have a teacher have like a pride flag up and just like a general like stated position that it's okay to not be straight when I was going to school, and that wasn't there. So, but like I feel like to anyone else, it should be a small thing. Like it shouldn't like matter to people who it's not there to specifically include.
Yeah, part of the way that these arguments are advanced too falls into this sort of like kids are the property of adults logic of like I saw this quote, it made me laugh so hard, and it was like an anti-sex ed protester being like, you can't teach my children how to give a blowjob. That's my job.
It's so fun. It's also, yeah. Part of what makes it so funny is like people who are against this kind of thing are extremely confused about what's going on. There's a big difference between teaching how to give a blowjob and teaching just that blowjobs exist, and people like, because how implies you're like teaching technique and like yeah,
it's like a Cosmo magazine.
Yeah, like
five ways to blow his mind. Handing out to the kids.
Which, like, I agree. I don't think we need to teach sex technique in school, but I do think like this is blowjobs. This is what diseases can and can't be transmitted. This is what it is. This is some of the safety stuff around it. It's fine. It's normal. But I think that's all you need to teach related to blowjobs. You don't need to teach how.
But yeah, and also, I mean, I understand what could, just to extend a small olive branch, like I can understand people feeling unsure about not having control over everything that your children is exposed to in the world, and being like, I am the one who discloses that blowjobs exist. It's not up to these educators to disclose that.
Yeah, but it's also just like an insane level. Like you can't do that for anything. Like,
yeah, it's a type of like hyper control. Like, I'll before that grade 5 sex education session, I became aware of blowjobs at some point.
Same. Yeah, if you want to get ahead of everyone, like you gotta teach your kid about blowjobs really young, like to get ahead of any of the other kids potentially teaching them that first.
Yeah, the whole school or like daycare environments plus media, YouTube, like just being aware of the idea broadly.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a losing battle. Like
definitely. Yeah. What do you remember from your sex ed in school? I'm curious if it's the same as my memory.
Yeah, there was someone who came and she wasn't part of the faculty at the school. Or she, at the very least, wasn't my teacher. And there was just, I think, one class that I remember, like one sex ed session that like kids laughed a lot at, and she like put a condom on a banana. And
I never saw. I always saw that on TV, and I was like, when are we getting the condom on the banana? It never.
yeah, oh yeah, we got that. We thought it was fucking hilarious.
Yeah. I remember in 5th grade, we had a mini course within health class called Family Life that
sounds like a magazine.
Yeah, it had like a booklet too with Family Life on it, and you had to get your parents to sign a form that you were allowed to go to it. But they split the class into boys and girls and talked a little bit about like anatomy, but also described the mechanics of heterosexual sex in very basic detail. When I was in grade 5, 10 years old, I don't remember them talking about any safety stuff like condoms or anything, but I do remember learning that in, I think, 8th grade. So to me, like it was.
I think it'd be 8th grade for me too.
But you don't remember this 5th grade teaching the mechanics in health class thing?
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I just remember the splitting up into 2 different classes. And there was a question box, which we always packed full of like ridiculous questions.
Oh shit. No, I do. Yeah. And it was 5th grade. Yeah, totally. No, yeah. Splitting up into, it was like 2 classes got shuffled by gender into.
Right.
And then, yeah, question box. Totally. Yeah.
Cause like, yeah, I remember like we were 10 years old and we already like, the boys in this class were already joking about sex things far beyond what they were teaching us. So like we had like questions to like, they're like inappropriate questions that he didn't answer. Some he did answer, even though they're kind of asked jokingly, and like it was very awkward. But I remember laughing a lot with all of our questions because you could just put whatever you want in the box, and.
Yeah, I remember someone asking a question like, what is blank, with blank being a really obscene term.
Right. Oh, yeah, like thing. I don't know if this came up specifically, but definitely a type of question would be like, what is a rusty trombone? Or like weird sex things like that kids hear. And you would just like, teacher would be like, okay, I'm not answering that. But like, yeah, I don't know. So to me, like the whole sex ed thing is so weird that like I definitely think it would have been better if we had been taught about different kinds of sex that people had. Just say like, hey, you do these different things. It's normal. It's not bad. And, you know, safe. If there's any relevant safety thing for any particular like major sex thing people do, you use condoms, etc. But yeah, I don't know. Seeing people now talk about it, they're like, you're going to like describe sex to 10-year-olds. I'm like, well, when I was a 10-year-old, they described sex to me in my Catholic elementary school. It didn't seem like that big of a deal. We all already kind of knew.
And we just laughed at it.
Yeah. Yes, it was awkward, but like also it's just probably good to like teach kids these things. But yeah, it gets spun into like weird shit.
Yeah, that demonstrates really well too how like there's in in the places where you have this, think of the children being deployed for these bad causes, there's always an inverse argument. Like, if you really want to think about all the children, think about what the actual impact is, like the consequences of these given disputes. Like, not having integration was really bad for children in a bunch of ways, in particular Black children.
Yeah.
Women not having the vote or other rights in society is bad for children, and especially girls. Not having sex education is bad for children if they're getting pregnant at young ages and they don't have the basic tools and knowledge to defend themselves against being taken advantage of, or to participate in things that they can't fully consent to or understand. Or
Yeah, and like you also, like if you think of one of the other school things that people argue about, like especially like when I was younger, it was a bigger thing, like creationism and evolution. Should we teach evolution in schools, or like evolution being taught in schools being attacked because it's my parental right to teach my kids creationism instead? It's the same structure of an argument. Like, I own my kid and I get to own what information they're exposed to. But it kind of shows, like, yeah, just how ridiculous it really is. I feel like the sex ed stuff gets artificially inflated by sort of the fears of child predation, which is like, a good enough fear to have. Like, anytime adults are like interacting with kids in a way, teaching them things about sex, there should be safeguards involved in terms of like other adults, and like just in general, like you don't want to like facilitate bad boundaries between kids and authority figures. So, it's a topic you want to handle with probably more care in that regard than evolution. Because like, yeah, I don't know, my like olive branch, like the reason I understand why people get scared about this stuff, or like if you look at Libs of TikTok, for anyone who doesn't know, Libs of TikTok is a Twitter account, right-wing media personality. Started off just kind of like posting videos from TikTok on Twitter, making fun of those SJW teachers and stuff, but was taken very seriously by the right-wing media and kind of becomes like a vanguard of accusing random queer people on the internet, especially teachers, librarians, people like that, of being groomers. 99.5% of what gets posted on Libs of TikTok is like either just like outright lies or like shoddily edited things that hide the actual points being made, or just literally people saying things that are completely 100% fine, that because of the implication of being on the page get read in ways that are wrong. But there is that
they might have a funny color of hair or something.
Right, yeah. But there is that like 0.5%. I'm thinking of one story in particular. There was like a teacher in Hawaii who had like tweets about the importance of sex ed and things, and then they were let go from their teaching position for like child sex predation, like legitimately bad, school looking into a potential legal action, a real case of like bad behavior. So like, yeah, I understand the desire to make sure that never ever happens, and that's good, but like that has nothing to do with, like, that part's wrong already. It has nothing to do with believing the kids deserve to be taught accurate things about sex, or that gay people and trans people exist and it's okay.
Yeah, the conflation of that and these wider subject matters through this hierarchical lens, it's building on that argument being true and having a real ethical insight to it, which is like, children should not be exploited. They should be protected from exploitation. And that's being used to attack vulnerable communities by spreading lies about them intentionally.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, like Libs of TikTok represents that, but there's a whole sub-industry of this like finding some piece of fractional truth that when you cut it up a certain way and you edit it a certain way, you can insinuate something across the backdrop of all these logical connections that have been made about the whole like culture war over like the groomer narrative. Like it's a disturbing and horrible and like skin crawling fact that child abuse is like part of our history as a species, as a culture, and here in Canada and the US, a variety of places all around the world. There's traditionally sanctioned types of child abuse, whether that's physical punishment and discipline, and also child marriage and sexual exploitation.
Yeah, you talk about grooming. It's not something that like LGBT people invented in the last 20 years. Like, it was very normalized for a long time for like literal adult men to marry like 12-year-old girls. Still legal in a lot of states for like pretty young kids. It's really weird.
Yeah, I kind of hate the way it becomes a partisan thing through like these networks of lies. But it is a fact that in the U.S., like Republican state legislatures push child marriage legislation with enough frequency that you could find 3 or 4 or 5 examples on Google right now if you searched. Like that's literally grooming in the textbook definition kind of way. And it's based in an idea of traditionalism that normalizes abuse of children. So just having a sincere interest in the well-being of children and trying to look at like where the problem areas are, that's like a good place to start.
Yeah.
When
Yeah,
compared
yeah.
to drag queen story time, which I agree with and think is not grooming, or is it? Not only do I agree with drag queen story time, I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's great too. I mean, also like if you're worried about grooming in the classroom, just a really great way to do that might be to increase funding to education, to public education, so that you can have more actively involved adults in any situation to like be there, have more authority figures kids can go to if there's any problems, more explanations about proper boundaries between kids and adult authority figures, but also just like, yeah, having more adults around, like you're going to be much less likely to have kids being isolated by authority figures in weird situations. Like, but a lot of the time that doesn't happen because there's like weird underfunding and stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, I think also when it comes to defense against abuse and exploitation, like there's an argument to expand sex education in the direction of being more explicit about that sort of like self-defense and like what the signs of grooming relationships are. Teaching children about defense against ways that boundaries can be violated feels like a reasonable course of action if it's a large concern and would naturally fit underneath the sex education umbrella.
Yeah, and I think like to some extent it already is. Like as soon as you're describing what sex is and isn't. I saw some story about like this person saying, I didn't realize that I was being abused until I learned about what sex was in school. And they said, you know, this isn't a thing that kids and adults should do with each other. And I was like, oh, this is like, I just had no context for what was happening to me before this. Yeah, I think being extra explicit about it is good. And like the more subtle grooming, emotional thing probably isn't covered, but should be. But yeah, just in general, yeah, it's protective to give kids more information about this and why it's wrong.
Yeah, I think that's really part of what makes sex education important. It's like being in a state of total naivety with that kind of thing is potentially dangerous. If someone who is abusive wanted to exploit that, and then also you're inevitably going to be getting some messages trickling in through other kids, through social relationships and stuff. And like when kids are alone, talking about fucked up swear words that they heard, or like the crazy sex position joke thing that they heard on some radio show that was meant for adults or whatever, like that shit is like all inevitable and baked in. So it's like, how do you give them the tools to navigate that space? Like they're going to be exposed to sexuality because sexuality is part of being human.
Yeah, and kids don't always have the best information. I remember some pretty bad sex information that I got from other kids as a kid.
Yeah, I definitely heard that sex was kissing each other on... I definitely heard, like, that was one of my earliest running into sex at the daycare kind of thing, was like the Cabbage Patch dolls kissing each other on the privates. I'd have to be like 6 or something, like really, really young, 5, 4 maybe.
Yeah, I remember having an argument with a friend about whether girls had holes in their private parts or if it was just like a patch of hair that just... I think he maybe seen like one picture one time or something. It was like, no, it's just a patch of hair. I like didn't understand the anatomy there, obviously, but like, yeah, it's like kids don't always know accurate information. It's good to give them accurate information.
But yeah, to a certain degree, I think it makes everyone a little uncomfortable to talk about because abuse is like so grotesque, and like any sort of connection between like talking about sex education and stuff naturally brings up these spaces of like thinking about yourself as a kid and stuff
You
like
want to
that.
talk about sex with kids? Yeah, it's
Yeah, and that sort of thing makes me feel awkward joking about it because it's just like it is really a grotesque and horrible thing that it's like really casually joked about too. So like any sort of double entendre that can get into any sort of like problematic space is you're always on like hyper guard about that when talking about sex education and children. But I just think it is best. Like if you're thinking about the children, then you should think about the full context of that sex education happens in and like what values it has. And similarly, like we want to think about the children when it comes to gay and trans youth, which is not the same as sex education.
yeah. I was just gonna
Doesn't
say
need to overlap very much.
I hate how those conversations like there's a bit of overlap in that like sex ed should include not just typical heterosexual sex, but that's about where the overlap ends, and like just teaching, you know, gay people exist, gay marriage, love. There's lots of things to do with being gay or bi that has nothing to do with sex that also need to be taught. And like same with being trans. It's not I hate how those things get conflated, even though we've kind of been doing it. It's because it's like all part of this school battleground right now where it gets like mixed up with each other is like all part of the same thing. But yeah, teaching accurate information about sex and teaching acceptance of gay and trans people aren't necessarily the same conversation. And the conflation of them into one conversation kind of, perpetuates this like weird sexualized grooming children narrative.
Kids know about love before they know about sex. So
Yeah.
children will be naturally taught about gay people existing in a non-sexual context first. Like it's just, you can tell kids that gay people exist at any age. There's nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's and same with trans people. You can teach kids about trans people at any age. Sometimes people are born and everyone says it's a boy, but they don't feel like a boy. They continue to feel like a girl forever, and so they can be a girl, and that's okay. Like there's nothing to do with sex in that description. Like, or you could also be a boy who dresses up in drag. That's cool too.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is I think that the particulars thread through to the universal in a way, in that the attack on gay and trans people targets them primarily, but has implications for people who fall outside of those groups, because it's an attack on people trusting themselves. It's like an attack on people having individuality. Like I think the real reason that these tight ass think of the children lying fucks hate drag queen story time is not because they actually think there's any threat to children or anything inappropriate happens or anything. Like it takes 5 minutes of investigation to just find out that's obviously not the case. The thing they're really concerned about is the way that the drag queen represents someone who is being themselves and being funny and just doing whatever they want, dressing however they want, talking and acting and joking and playing however they want. They're setting a spectrum. It's like shifting the Overton window of individuality and saying you can be whoever you want. You can even be this. You can even be someone who wears this extreme outfit and acts in particular ways that are like often stigmatized in like tight ass, like rigid society about like how loud you talk or how you're like,
how expressive and the motions you make with your hands and the tone of your voice.
So I think it is about more than just this like fake story being put forward of like there being some danger or negative impact to children, or it could be traumatizing. It's like I think that's all just post hoc kind of like.
Yeah, it makes even less sense for drag queen story than for teachers, because drag queens, like, they don't have like, the teachers have the same kids in their class all year. You could pull a kid aside after class, talk to them, or just thinking it through. Like drag queen, they come for like an hour and read a book and then leave, and they're at a library and the parents are there and the other librarians are there. It's just like there's zero danger. Like just necessarily, like, there's the only danger there is ideological, that kids are going to think that it's okay to be different.
Yeah, and the way that I feel like the thing about drag queens too is because they're so colorful and they're often like have extravagant outfits and stuff. There's something about the drag queen form. It feels almost like setting the slider on a video game to like max, of just like seeing like this humanity like really just like pop into the extreme. I think that the value that it has for children to be exposed to performers who demonstrate confidence, a really extreme amount of confidence, while also demonstrating an extreme amount of difference, is beneficial for children to be able to see a world that has room for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with the rainbow flag too, is like the rainbow flag also means sort of diversity in general. Like the beauty and wonder of diversity is demonstrated in the metaphor of the rainbow, in particular with the LGBT community, but also in other contexts as well. So like to take away the celebration of rainbows, the celebration of complementary difference from the classrooms, is a culture war that goes deeper than just cracking down on gay and trans kids, although it's certainly that. It's also a war on cracking down on the idea that children can be who they feel that they are, whatever that is. And it's to crush them into being what the like generic student form, generic human form is the ideal, and deviations from it are implicitly ostracized.
Yeah, we're implementing a new school pride flag, a worker, it's just shades of gray, or it's like a gray flag. I don't know. There's probably some flag that's already gray. But it just struck me as funny to like minimize the diversity. It's like, no. We can't be any color on the rainbow. We're just allowing a few colors, the ones that fit into capitalist society best.
Yeah, the flag is made up of entirely gray and off gray gears, which are all exactly the same size, working together in perfect harmony.
Beautiful, perfectly enmeshing gears, all exactly the same. The school pride flag. Welcome back, everybody, to 55 Plus Outrage, the most popular news show for males in the plus 55 age category who are well off and outraged at the state of society. We have a very special interview today on the show with an exciting new up-and-coming talent in the politics arena. But it's a name you might have heard before, Traditional Jones. Traditional Jones, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You were my favorite boxer as a child. Me and my dad, we used to always watch your boxing matches, your fights. He would say, oh, he's so strong.
Right.
He always wins the fights.
Yeah, I've been a fighter for a long time. A lot of people know me for my fighting, and I'm humbled by that. People don't expect, a little kid like me, growing up in the suburbs, could ever become a world famous boxer and then go into a senatorial run. A lot of people have doubted me along the way, but look at me now.
To me, it makes perfect sense to make the jump from boxing to senatorial runs, because as you already pointed out, you fight in both arenas.
Both are like fighting. Yeah, and over the last couple of years, I've started reading things online. I've done some of my own research, and I've got some of my favorite pages and share memes with my friends, and started to have sort of another interest, which is the children and their well-being. I mean, the whole world's turned upside down.
Say no more. I know exactly what you mean.
Litter boxes, adult diapers.
15-syllable pronouns.
Yeah. That stuff inspired me to act.
As well, it should inspire any person who understands the truth to act. I understand you actually have a platform to save the children. Yeah.
Save the children, yeah.
Please, our audience is dying to know. How do we do it? How do we save the children?
Yeah, well, I may have hung up my boxing gloves, but these are two metaphorical gloves that you could wear for a 1-2 policy punch to save children.
Nice.
Yeah. And the first punch is to remove pride flags, rainbow flags, and other gender flags, gender stuff.
Yeah, I hear there's tens of thousands of those flags now, and they're all disgusting.
Right.
I agree.
Messages like "be yourself" or "you are accepted here."
Accepting them no matter what.
As far as I'm concerned, this is sexual harassment of our children. It needs to stop.
Thank you. So many politicians are afraid to say it. Right. That probably comes from your time in the ring, not being afraid.
Yeah. A lot of your traditional insider politicians, they are afraid to protect children.
Right.
And so, of course, the second punch, the 2 to the 1-2,
So 1 is pride flags. That's already quite a punch.
I say get them all out across all the schools.
But yeah, that second punch, you're winding up, and I'm in such anticipation for it.
So my other commitment is to legalize, or where otherwise necessary, protect the already legal status of romantic and sexual grooming of minors by adult men, particularly men who are powerful, have high position in society. We want to fully expedite the process of connecting adult men to young partners for child marriage.
Thank you. Yeah, please. And I assume you buy into all the sort of pseudo-intellectual evolutionary biology type justifications for this type of thing, and religious justifications as well. And
you look in history, there's been a lot of this, and I'm a traditional guy. That's why my parents named me traditional. We were a traditional family.
right. And really, this is about the freedom of adult men to protect children.
Right, exactly. And who will protect a child from grooming better than her beloved adult husband?
Exactly.
So after that, my platform kind of falls off and there's not much more details.
Well, you don't really need more details after that.
That's the point.
It's already 2 punches. You don't want to pummel us all to death with good ideas.
Yeah, some weaker boxers would need more punches to land a knockout. But I think this is a 1-2 punch knockout, and I will be going to the Senate. Mathematically, just looking at the demographics here and past electoral results, I'm guaranteed to go to the Senate. The other party doesn't even run candidates part of the time. And I'm like handpicked. I'm like their guy. So
Absolutely.
I've just basically been appointed here in this context.
Will of the people have spoken.
Right.
So, yeah.
They do. All the
They
polling
want
shows
children
they do.
protected.
And who better to protect a child than a fighter?
Thank you. Yes, we need a fighter to fight on behalf of children. Yeah, thank you for being you.
Thank you for hosting this platform for patriots who are above the age of 55, tend to be in certain income demographics.
Yeah. Well, I'm well paid to do it.
Well, as you should be. With commanding an audience share like that.
Oh, thank you.
And I look forward to, when I'm in Senate, having a very special relationship with you to help make sure the news is always accurate.
Next up on 55 Plus Outrage, these disgusting sexual Marxists have been having sex with grocery items at the store and then putting them back on the shelves. And they say that we're bigots if we won't eat them. More details tonight.
I remember you saying before that this subject really makes you angry online compared to other subjects.
Yeah.
Like when you see people stigmatizing, talking about gay people existing and gay love existing in school, that it's the thing that makes you angry online.
Yeah, and connecting it to child sex abuse as there's all these implications that it's just it makes me extremely angry. It makes me angry because I know what it was like to be a kid who didn't get positive messaging in schools about being gay, but also just makes me angry to feel like you're being accused of something just for existing. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's pretty common that things that directly affected you make you the angriest in politics. When I think of libs of TikTok in specific, I just feel intense rage.
Yeah, it's twisted. Well, and it's an attempt to dehumanize gay people.
Yeah.
And trans people. It's not just it's not some innocent schmuck who doesn't know any better, repeating something. You know what I mean? It's not some passive, cultural, ingrained, unthought about homophobia. It's an intentional political campaign to try to ostracize sexual and gender diversity for the purposes of having more people live as straight and cis than would if they were given freedom. It's a political campaign that's being intentionally pushed by bad actors. It's worth mentioning. Libs of TikTok, when they post shit, it's not innocent. They're being corrected in the comments of the way they've misinterpreted or misrepresented what happened. Yeah. They have all the information required to take down stuff that's not true, do their due diligence with their platform, and they do the exact opposite intentionally. And they're just one actor in this space. It is a malicious, intentional attack. And that's the context in which we're responding to, which is why this stuff gets tied together. But like, I don't know, it makes me angry also.
Yeah. It also like really like for like thinking about the recruitment thing, like for a while, I remember, especially when I was younger, like hearing I don't know what the word recruitment, but the idea that like people become gay or trans because they were abused. And I was like, I have no memory of ever being sexually abused as a child, but like thinking that like maybe I was and I don't remember it, and like trying to like remember things, or like just like fucked with my head to be like, oh, is that how it works? And then it's like, well, no, like I'm pretty sure no. Even now I'm like, maybe there's some like thing I don't remember. I don't know. Well, I'm pretty sure not. It just like telling those kinds of things to kids is messed up.
Yeah, no, and not only the brutal, accusatory, homophobic angle, but the naive, innocent children being like the front lines of the battlefield of like repressive meme war, of like putting these weird fucking ideas, these destructive ideas in children's heads over issues that they need, like coming into sexuality, like going from a non-sexual being to a sexual being at the appropriate age through the developmental process is already a confusing, self-doubting and anxiety-inducing time. Like, then to throw in the different types of thought shapes that these fuckers throw into the minds of kids at that moment for the purposes of trying to keep people in the closet so they can hold together political coalitions. It's some deeply twisted shit.
Yeah, the shit that like conservatives come up with is like some of the weirdest shit sometimes. Like, especially now if you go on Twitter and just like read people talking about trans people, there's just like so many like weird assumptions or things people throw out there. Like they want to use the women's bathroom. It's like a sex thing. Everything's like a sex thing. It's like literally, like you could see a trans person on Twitter being like, I just want to use the bathroom and not be bothered. And they're like, oh yeah, I bet this is some dirty pervert thing for you. And they're just like, in the like hidden replies, there's like the wildest shit you've ever seen. They just like start like all this fan fiction of like what they think is going on inside like gay and trans people's heads. That like, it's like, I assume that trans people just want to go to the bathroom. In the bathroom that looks like the same gender. That
they post a
like,
screenshot of like a FetLife page where it's like someone who's got a pee fetish, and then they're like, I saw this one FetLife profile. It must be
yeah, or even like if there's no, just like make shit up about people. And yeah, sometimes it's based on like oh yeah, there's the gay people bug catcher thing. Like I've seen this collage of forum posts talked about how, you know, gay people are degenerate and they all want HIV because there's like a screenshot of like 4 comments of people saying bug chasery shit. Yeah, I don't know. I hate it. But then, yeah, like I hate it, but then I imagine being like a 12-year-old kid reading that and being like, oh, is that what it means to be gay? Like, huh.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was lucky my mom taught me about this stuff in a reasonable way. Like, I knew trans people existed before the transgender tipping point. I had gay relatives who were accepted in the family, and I knew that in places sometimes they weren't accepted, though. Like, I was aware of that as a kid. Like, it's so crazy to think about a little kid's mind having to navigate that sort of knowledge, even as a straight kid, but especially a gay kid, like a kid who's having the first latent stirrings of romantic interest and stuff. When I was a kid, I was told that if you see people giving them a hard time, you have to stand up for them.
I don't remember my parents ever saying anything about gay people, positive or negative. But I did have a general sense based on how they responded to most things that I felt it was extremely unlikely they would care. But it still would have been nice to have some like positive statement about it being okay or whatever. But definitely way, way better than having any negative statements. I remember my cousin's dad once saying to us, well, to his son mostly, but I was standing there, that he would be disappointed if he was gay. And then I never liked him again after that.
I'm disappointed in you too, motherfucker.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, like, it's hard to explain. It's like a deep, like, distrust feeling of like, oh, this person doesn't like me for some reason.
Right. Well, and I remember middle school being a really homophobic place, like casually homophobic, like in the logic and wording, and
Oh, yeah.
the slurs are just used constantly then, for in my age demographic, being born in the beginning of the 90s.
Yeah, me too, for sure.
Did you have that feeling with that sort of ambient homophobia, like that you couldn't trust people who were like that, or?
I don't know. It depends. I think to some extent I probably repressed it because it was like everybody. But also there was like some amount of like, I feel like an implied distinction between saying it and like something about telling your kid you would be disappointed in them feels like deeper than making like dick sucker jokes or something. But it definitely didn't make me feel good. Yeah, it's a different feeling. One of them was like a deep like rejection feeling, even though it wasn't my adult. The other was more like feeling like I liked something embarrassing. Like say you like a TV show that everyone else thinks is for kids. It's like goofy. It's kind of embarrassing, humiliating. That was more the sense of that type of joking. It was like, oh, it's humiliating to be me. Not it's like deeply unacceptable. It's more just like a goofy, weird thing about you.
Yeah, that's interesting. The having a secret show that you like is an interesting metaphor. It kind of resonates with me, and like, although I can't pin down something in specific, but just that sort of like knowing, although it's like Jurassic Park with that sort of like, it's like you're Jurassic Park and the velociraptors are walking by you when you're like in a homophobic society, a homophobic subculture, and you're not out as gay and people keep on saying homophobic shit all the time. It's almost kind of like the homophobic beast walks by you, and it might be a threat or it might not. I don't know. Maybe it's not a great metaphor.
Right.
More intense than the one that you used, for sure. It's just interesting how present it was. Like I think it's a lot better now from what I hear. But I assume not everywhere. But
oh, you know what it is? What I was trying to think of, I feel like the reason it didn't feel like a big threat is not that there's anything wrong with that. I feel like that there's a big undercurrent of that in my experience of it. It was like, yes, we constantly joke about this, but not that there's anything wrong with it. Not deeply wrong. It's kind of like cringe we didn't have that term then, but it's kind of cringe to be gay, but there's nothing wrong with it.
I wonder where does that phrase come from? Not that there's
Seinfeld. I think there's an episode of Seinfeld where I never watched Seinfeld, but I think
there's kind of a neurotic, funny like I definitely. It's funny that rings a bell for me too around homophobia in middle school.
Yeah, it's definitely a meme. Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, it's like you say the homophobic stuff, but then you're like, well, I mean, technically it's okay, but it was sincere. No, it's true. Like that was how the non-homophobic kids justified to themselves participating in it too. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
It's funny because I think back on that and I have sort of pangs of guilt knowing I participated in these bad things, but it also doesn't really resonate with my idea of myself. Like, why? How did you participate in that? Like, even knowing it was wrong, and it's like you had these irony barriers and stuff. Like, it's easy enough to build irony barriers like that in various contexts.
Right.
But yeah, not that there's anything wrong with that. Seinfeld, if it was Seinfeld, really provided a
cover or.
Yeah, either it's a cover for homophobia or it's like the steam valve that makes it not severe. So it wasn't punishing to be around because Seinfeld gave kids the tool to say just kidding in a way that resonated.
Right.
But not just kidding about the joke, but just kidding about whether or not being gay is worth making fun of. Like, just kidding, being gay isn't worth making fun of, but then you just keep doing it. But like you have your own little...
Yeah. No, I feel like the message I took was that it is worth being made fun of, but it's not like fundamentally wrong. It's just like,
the tide of history slowly turning.
Yeah.
Different parts come at different times.
But yeah, thinking about it being better now, it's funny. Like, I remember like 2 years after I graduated, my friend told me that his little brother said that everyone in the school now, the school that we used to go to, was bisexual.
These days.
And so part of me, I remember being like, oh, damn, really? Like there was zero out gay bi anyone people when I was at this school. And now you're saying everyone's bisexual? What a world I could have lived in. If everyone was bisexual, that would have been wonderful. Anyway, I assume that this was a great exaggeration. There was probably just like a couple kids who came out as bi or something, 2 or 3. But it also like this memory is what I always think of when I hear people saying like, oh, my daughter's class, they're all trans. The whole class has become trans now, and it's catching on. And I'm like, are they all, or is there like 2 or 3 or something? Yeah, I don't know. The social contagion thing is weird, and it's the other argument against telling kids that it's okay to be gay or trans, that this will somehow like trick them into thinking they are, when there's no like evidence that can happen. Canada became the first, or one of the first countries to actually like measure how many trans people exist within Canada in our census last year. It was the first time the question was on there where they distinguished between sex at birth and gender identity. So they got a measure of trans people. And amongst Generation Z, it was like 0.79%. So very small percentage of the population. It's not this thing where every kid in the class is trying. It's still, even among that cohort, the youngest kids, the ones who are the most accepting of it, still very low. It's slightly higher than older age groups, which I think is pretty easy to account for in terms of just general acceptance and whatnot. But
yeah, it was like, I think the oldest age group was like 0.15 or something like that.
Yeah. Boomers are 0.15%, and older than boomers are 0.12%. But like millennials.
Greatest gen.
Yeah, greatest gen. The millennials are 0.51 and Gen X are 0.19. So like, yeah, you can frame that as like, oh, it's 0.79. That's like 4 times as much as Gen X, but it's still just like a really small percentage of people. So you'd think if something was a social contagion, it would affect more people than that.
Yeah, there's that graph people show of like the amount of left-handedness growing over time. Like left-handedness used to be repressed. And
Right.
then when you could start writing with either hand and they wouldn't force you to always write with your right based on some weird sort of religious tradition. When they let people start writing with their left hand, there was an increase at the start, and then it leveled out to, we now understand today, how many people are left-handed. So similarly, by stopping to repress, we're in the process of learning, and we're probably not at the end of it, how many people are transgender or non-binary.
Right.
And so far it's under 1%.
Yeah, even with all the massive increase, the 400% increase from Gen X, it's still under 1%.
I would expect to see that it goes to over 1% in the future, and maybe even settles somewhere in the single digits.
Yeah.
That's just a guess. But there's plenty of breathing room in terms of a worry that my kids' class is all transgender.
Yeah, 100%. Because that's technically the claim. If you say my class, the kids' class is all transgender, what you're saying is that 100% of the kids in this class are trans. It just seems really, really unlikely based on Canadian census data from last year.
Yeah, there's so much unfair attacks on trans people, and they all generally connect to the think of the children frame being used maliciously by bad actors who want to force people to live their lives in closets. But I mean, we could be here all day debunking that stuff.
Yeah.
It's definitely true. So the real dispute, and not often like said out loud by the anti-trans, anti-queer people, is there's a certain percentage of people who are bisexual who could live their life straight, or gay who would live in the closet if social conditions were bad enough that they were forced to. And the same thing goes for trans people. There's people who are, for lack of a better word, queer, that could live their lives in a variety of ways based on their own free judgment, that would live repressed. There is a level of social suppression that would force them to live lives in the closet. And there's a lot of people that, like a I know people who have decided to live cisgender lives despite identifying as trans for periods of time based on the social impact of it and the context that they were in. So like the real debate, the real thing that's being pushed here, the real point of contention is how much do we stigmatize this happening? Like
I don't think you can make gay people straight or make trans people not trans. But yeah, like you can make probably most bi people just live straight lives, and a good percentage of gay people too. And like trans people, you could probably push most people into the closet with enough
inciting of hatred and violence towards them.
Yeah.
Stigmatization. Enough libs of TikTok are running. Eventually everyone starts lying and the world is like a cartoon parable. So yeah, that's why I support rainbow flags and drag queen story time sincerely. And I've kind of thought a lot about it because of the internet, like these discourses that happen.
Yeah.
But you've definitely always been my go-to expert, Aaron. You're always 2 steps ahead of me on the latest disputes.
No, yeah, when this one started coming in and replacing critical race theory as like the big thing conservatives were pushing as the culture war forefront, I was just like, like I don't want this. Not that critical race theory is any better, but yeah, it definitely hate this one a lot. But yeah, that's another think of the children thing that was big very recently. Like, oh, we're teaching these poor white kids to. There was even this thing in the debate sphere a lot of right-wing people are doing of like, I can't remember, it was like Jimmy or something. They're just like had this made up name for this poor little white kid who's like being left out now or being taught that he's evil because he's white. And then all the non-white kids are going to make fun of him and be like, you're a colonizer, and like throw rocks at him or something. Like, please just think of Jimmy. Like, what about Jimmy and how horrible his life is going to be with this critical race theory teaching kids that it's evil to be white and you're a slave-owning monster if you were born with a certain skin color, which, like, obviously is not what critical race theory is. Most of what they're calling critical race theory isn't critical race theory. It's literally just teaching, like, accurate stuff about American history, racism, white supremacy in American history, Canadian history, teaching about actual facts of the past and how they affect social conditions today. But, yeah, it all gets, like, boiled down to, oh, they're teaching white kids to hate themselves.
Yeah, it's again about lying. Like it's about, like hierarchy has a way of like eroding the truth. Like hierarchical systems and hierarchical logic and reason has a way of like eroding the truth. And the move to like ban critical race theory in terms of like accurate teaching of American history as like a settler colonial, and not even using these words for kids, but like teaching the reality of slavery existing, like the dispossession of the Americas and stuff. Like, if you want to teach kids about history, that's just like part of history in a very neutral way. And the argument is basically that needs to be removed in favor of a historiography, which is built for national interest, like a propaganda history that is literally known lies.
Yeah.
So like they're saying, think of the children to argue for probably one of the worst things that you can do socially and politically, which is like, rewrite history from the perspective of like the ruling class and deprive people of knowledge of sort of the flows and shape of history.
Yeah, and like give kids an incorrect view of like if you don't teach about the history of white supremacy and the effects of white supremacy on society today, then kids aren't going to understand that, which is bad. Like, because it's not just history, it's like the way history affects the current society and the people who are living in the society with you. Like what it would mean to have an equal society and like the ways in which there's still gaps to be closed there. Because yeah, if anything, if they want to teach anything about slavery, like obviously they don't want to completely pretend slavery didn't happen, but there's like all these lines about how, it was inevitable that the day the Constitution was signed, the end of slavery was already, I've heard this line, the end of slavery was already the fate was sealed, because obviously our founding fathers understood that this would unfold 100 years later to get slavery out of the picture, which is bullshit. And then the story can end with the 1960s when equality was fully achieved, and
in black and white photographs, even though color film was available.
And even though in the 1960s, when those things were being fought for, they were doing the same shit, saying, think of the children. We can't get rid of segregation, legal segregation. We have to keep it because it's going to hurt the children. Now they're like, we can't teach kids that there's still racism in society because it's going to hurt the white kids.
Yeah, they're accusing our little children of being racist against them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's sometimes posed this difference between the individual and the universal, or the particularities versus the universal, politics of identity versus universalist politics. But I think the particulars make up the universal, and what applies to the particulars often has implications for the universal. And when we talk about thinking of the children, the place where these threatening, intentional misuses of this strong rhetorical argument that we have ethical responsibilities towards children in all these misapplied hierarchical ways. If we think about the children in all these instances, we should think of the children who are ostracized, othered, deprived, targeted.
Right.
And by doing that, we can get a better picture of the universal. So the sliver of truth with the critical race theory history thing is that it is probably true that sometimes kids who are white feel bad for learning about what colonizers did and realizing that they're descendants of, they have some connection to that. It might be true that some kids or adults, for that matter, anyone, might reasonably feel bad about that, even though it's sort of based on an untrue blending of the individual and the society they're a part of, misrepresenting to feel guilt is to take agency for it in a place where your agency is fairly small. If you're at the point of realizing racism is bad in that moment, anyways.
Yeah, rather than, think of how my poor child won't be able to maintain their position at the top of a hierarchy, in general, to focus on the dispossessed, the underdog, in whatever particular thing you're talking about. But then also that, I've definitely seen some cringe. There was one about gender I saw a while ago where there was some classroom where some kid, they had the boys performatively apologize to the girls for patriarchy or something, which just seems weird. I don't recommend. Definitely teach the kids about patriarchy, but it's not these boys' fault. You can teach the kids that all of us have a responsibility to unlearn patriarchal ideas and not enact patriarchal structures that oppress girls. That's bad. So we should all do that. But yeah, the apologizing thing is a bit weird.
Yeah, I don't know if I imagine it as a sort of a forced apology. I can sort of look at it through the cringe lens, but I can also look at it through a more innocuous lens, depending on if a kid wanted to apologize, a kid might want to apologize.
Sometimes you see kind of performative apology things on race or gender lines that adults do as a performative thing. And so I don't even think that's a bad thing. But yeah, the force part is what's kind of weird about it. And the kind of confusing of individual responsibility with group responsibility. But I feel at least adults, we're all born into the society with an inherited situation, but to some extent, adults are co-creators of society in a way that I think children aren't. So if you want to apologize for patriarchy as an adult man, it's fine to take some ownership over that, but putting ownership of that onto kids is not the best thing. But if a kid who is a boy and then it's I've said mean things about girls before, and it's actually kind of fucked up, I've realized now because we learned about patriarchy in school. That makes sense. Yeah, you can apologize.
Yeah, and I think there's reasonable discussions to have about what ages kids are brought into the fold about different things that we know about the world. But generally, we should share with them what we know, what we know to be true.
Yeah.
There's lots of weird rituals. That's sort of what I'm thinking of. This is probably playing the devil's advocate too much because I don't care or desire that for children, that the boys would all apologize to the girls all ritualistically. Right. But all the boys apologizing to all the girls ritualistically strikes me anthropologically as something that could be genuinely part of a healthy society if it was done correctly.
It doesn't seem like the worst ritualistic. I mentioned I went to Catholic school. We, until junior high, I think. I can't remember. But when I was in elementary school, for sure, we recited the Lord's Prayer every morning, like the way American kids recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And it's kind of a weird thing. Like, it's just so seared into my head. Like, I can... Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
It'd be sweet if they ended it with like, it's okay to be gay, it's okay to be trans, God loves you, amen.
Yeah, just pop that in there.
Yeah.
I would have liked it.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. Some people are gay, some people are trans, not that there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, this is kind of like a basic, like sort of Reddit atheist point, but like, you know, commit to the logic of God a bit. God made gay and trans people. Makes sense.
God doesn't make mistakes. So if you think he mistakenly made people trans, that just makes no sense. So.
And what would the devil do? The devil would pretend to be God to try to turn people against each other.
Also, just weird religion thing. Like, I feel like the first time I really considered sex was when I asked people what virgin meant, because the word Virgin Mary gets thrown around a lot.
Right.
The Virgin Mary, we love the Virgin Mary. It's great. I also like the Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Also, like, just in terms of like, if you think kids should be completely protected from all mentions and understanding of sex, like, I played Joseph in the Christmas play in 6th grade. So we had like lines we were talking about. Like, I was married to a woman who was giving birth to a kid, but I wasn't the father, but the father was God, but she's a virgin. And these are all things we're talking about in our lines in the play. If you're thinking of this, like, kids should be completely protected from all mentions of sex in all contexts. Like the Christmas story, you kind of can't tell kids that.
Right, yeah, you got to cut the virgin thing. You got to drop this weird virgin thing and just...
But it's like, it's crucial to the thing, because like God, you know, that's how you know God was the father.
Yeah.
And why the fruit of the womb is so blessed, as they like to tell me.
Right, yeah, the fruit of the womb fruit.
That's all kids are. They're just womb fruit.
That's all that God embodied in the flesh is, womb fruit.
Mr. Spendsworth, Buysworth is on the line. He wants to continue your feud.
All right, put him through. Hello, Buysworth?
Spendsworth, what a pleasure to be hearing from you today.
I mean, technically, I'm hearing from you, Buysworth, but...
Well, I'm sure you remember our friendly, or should I say not so friendly, bet on who could profit the most off of undermining the well-being of children.
Oh, yes, I've created quite a bit of misery for those little ones since I last talked.
I've got an update for you, Spendsworth, because I have been causing a lot of child misery for profit as well.
Oh, Buysworth, you think you can outdo me? Not a chance.
Well, I've been buying and selling minerals from child labor mines. For great profit, I might add.
It's child's play. Who doesn't do that?
Spendsworth. It was a lot of minerals and I made a lot of money. A lot of slavery.
Not only did we increase the number of child slaves within our organization by triple, we convinced all the newspapers not to report on it because we've been feeding them stories of fake things that are happening to children. You know, litter boxes, pronoun things. Not a peep about child slavery in any of these publications.
Oh, but you fell into my trap.
Oh, we'll see about that.
Your publications have been reposting stories of my organization's anti-LGBT newspaper service made for profit, which is targeted specifically at making LGBT children miserable. You've been helping me, Spendsworth. You fell into my trap.
Oh, Buysworth. Well, it's still our news outlets spreading the stories. And you know what else our news outlets have been doing? We've been pushing really hard for a candidate that I've been funding who wants to protect the legalization of child marriage. What do you say to that?
No, you're spending all that money on a senatorial candidate without even putting in the platform that he's going to lower safety standards on baby food? Amateurish. Frankly, amateurish. spend all that
He
time and
hasn't
money?
said he won't lower them.
Well, I'm waiting to hear him say he will. I am. We all are. And we will be voting for him.
And that's the problem with you. You just wait around for someone else to take away rights and create misery for children.
Please.
Well, as we here at Spendsworth
My
Industries...
company is fighting in the Supreme Court right now for immunity on child slavery. There's going to be a lot of exploitation as a result of that.
Now, while you're busy fighting on the Supreme Court, we are busy carving out little exceptions to things that technically aren't child slavery.
Well, I guess it's just a wash between us then. We've both done a lot, and we're an impasse for now.
Yeah, the scoreboard remains equal, but I remain confident that we will out-harm children.
Yeah, fat chance.
Things on your end seem to be sputtering.
No,
You'll be helping children in no time.
I won't be. And
Buysworth.
won't be helping any children.
At your own expense, no less.
I think it's not true. That is not true. You're going to be doing that.
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'll call you again in a few days.
All right, talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Miss you.
Oh, no.
You're my best friend. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I hate
unless.
you.
Well,
Unless.
a little both.
Bye-bye.
It's very special what we have. That's all I'll say.
Yes, especially anger-inducing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, bye.
Bye.
No, Buysworth, you always want me to hang up first.
Spendsworth, you hang up first, you miserable dog.
Fine, but only because I have more children harming to do. Good day.
So, thinking of the children in politics is genuinely a useful thing to do because of children's unique vulnerability and place in society. It's an ethical insight that is worth applying to one's politics. However, won't somebody think of the children is misused intentionally to reinforce hierarchical systems with spurious, nonsensical arguments that basically function through raw repetition and association rather than like logic and reason and ethics. So I thought it might be good to, just wrapping up here, to think about ways that you could think of the children politically in ways that are beneficial. And one of the first things that comes to mind for me is stopping the physical punishment of children and generally like engaging children as intelligent beings to the highest degree possible. It's something you could do like politically to embrace and support children in society, changing things like the school system, making sure that climate change is dealt with. It's just essential that the biosphere and ecology is taken care of imminently to the highest degree possible in every way possible for the sake of everyone, but especially children who will inherit the world. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I'm doing if I'm thinking of the children politically.
Yeah, climate change is a big one. Makes sense because it's so future oriented.
Yeah, actually, I gotta say, like, let's just put up like having a rainbow flag in a classroom and catastrophic climate change next to each other, and like think of the comparative impacts that these two things have on children for a second. Like,
yeah, let's think of the children here. Let's do an experiment between these two things.
yeah, that's the we shouldn't faithfully and uncritically think of the children in the way that is prescribed by our betters and passed down to us. Let's really run the experiment. Catastrophic climate change, children. Think about children in relation to climate change. Rainbow flags in classrooms and the teacher saying that it's okay to be gay or trans, and that's part of the normal spectrum of accepted human behaviors and expressions. Effect on children.
The only way I think to reach the wrong conclusion on that is to just be greatly mistaken about both of these topics. Like, not believe climate change is real or a real problem or really going to happen, and like just believe some wild shit about what teaching gay and trans acceptance would mean.
Yeah, and as long as you have climate change down, you could I was thinking, like, do you have to be misinformed on both? And I determined you don't, actually.
Yeah, you believe everything Libs of TikTok says, but you also just are fully in line with the facts of climate change.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's still a bigger threat for sure. Yeah.
Even if you believe all that Libs of TikTok lying bullshit, as long as you also believe climate change, we're good in terms of weighing this out.
No, yeah. I think in general, think of the children one of the biggest things that society needs to do to increase the well-being of children and giving children better lives and better experiences of the world is probably just to recognize that children are full people who have their own perspective and their own, like, give them ability to express their needs and more ways for them to have their needs met, as like a general statement.
Yeah, make sure that they know that there's room for them in the world and that they won't be ostracized. You know, like that. Such an important thing for kids to know, that they don't have to be some narrow thing that's being put on them, that there's like a spectrum of opportunities. And like, it's not only like treating kids like they have agency, but like teaching kids that they have agency as well.
Definitely.
That's the paradox. I always get caught up on the child lib stuff, because it's like often there's not a full discussion of the developmental ages of kids, and like how, like, to some degree, kids need to not only be given freedom, but they need to be nourished and protected, and these things aren't in contradiction.
Yeah, and given boundaries, and like, yeah, like if your kid says they need to eat only candy for a year, you don't have to feed them only candy for a year. I'm not saying just do whatever kids say. And I'm not saying that kids are adults and can make every decision an adult can make. Like, you have to still root your understanding of like how much agency kids have in their sort of developmental trajectory that they're along. But like, so the ideology that says that kids basically aren't people and just need to be bossed around and used to make their parents look good or to fulfill their parents' ideas of what they should be. They're sort of like instrumental to the parents' ideas of what the family, etc., should be like. Like, that's the kind of thing that I think we need to push back against. And like, yeah, kids don't have all the agency in the world when they're born, but like, we need to teach them how to exercise the agency that they do have.
But yeah, sincerely and unironically, please think of the children when it comes to climate change, when it comes to poverty, when it comes to war, when it comes to the prospect of building a post-scarcity, sufficiently automated, luxury, communalist, library socialist society, commune of communes, where people are paid according to need and they have access to a greater abundance of experiences than ever before provided in human history, but now provided for far less of an ecological cost because of the scaling up of communal sharing through a usufructian library lending system. That's the conclusion of really thinking about the children.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I loved the library because they let you take out books for free. And I didn't have a lot of money as a child.
Well, you never got to go to a store and like spend money, right? Like,
yeah, present your own card and like be given things to take with you.
Yeah, it's like the first place that you actually give the kid the card and let them really go make their own choices. And I read fucking Calvin and Hobbes, I read UFO books, I read How to Do Magic books, and I read Mad Magazine. And all those things I would have never had without the library. That I look back now and I'm like, shit. Like, I love that shit. I still love UFOs.
Yeah, if there had been a library for all kinds of things as a kid, I mean, obviously there probably would have been, like, hopefully they don't let like a 4-year-old take out a power drill or something.
Right. Yeah, I hate to stereotype, but toy library.
Yeah, toy. Yeah, could you imagine? Because then, like, you could just have like any toy. Like, it wouldn't be that like your parents choose which toy to buy you.
Yeah,
and
you don't
then
have to beg them.
Yeah,
if it's
like
there, you can
oh, I
borrow
want
it.
this one, and then like if you don't like it that much, you want a different toy after. Like, you could just take out different toys whenever you want. No, like, oh, we already bought you toys. You don't get any new toys. Like, no, well, I'll take these ones back and then I'll get new toys. Beautiful.
Yeah, and actually teaching children to participate in a library lending system in a way that respects, like the idea it's my toy and I can break it. Most kids don't have that idea, but it's sort of like technically the rules.
Right.
It seems genuinely great that you could teach children alternative property like the library is genuinely teaching children about alternative property arrangements and like having in your possession objects that are yours for a limited time that you have a responsibility to try to keep in reading order and then return when you're done. And like the big toy is going to hate this idea, but I think it's a real revolutionary strategy.
Yeah, Big Toy wants you to like
children
buy
are
your
the future.
buy your kids all the Hot Wheels they want, and then they play with it for a few months, and then they move on to something else, and those Hot Wheels just stay in a box in the closet, and then some other kids want Hot Wheels, they got to buy their own Hot Wheels. No, not with
Cha-ching.
the toy library.
Hot Wheels man gets paid again.
Library Society, we would create far fewer Hot Wheels, but they would be better quality, and we would all share them.
Play to win games like Magic cards, Pokemon cards, that kind of stuff, or pay to win pack buying games and stuff like that. When you're done with your little Magic the Gathering phase, you bring all the cards back to the library and they're redistributed into new packs. I know some people who don't play any trading card games probably hear that and they're like, oh, why would you even put them in packs? And trust me, it's a major part of the appeal of this stuff. Like, a lot of people are popping more packs than they're actually playing games. Let's be honest. This is a commodity game.
No, yeah, I barely ever did this, but my brother was into Magic, and I bought like a starter pack, the big thick one, they call it a starter pack.
Yeah, with like a deck you can play with.
Yeah, a deck, yeah, and you just like, it's a cool thing to open it up and be like, which cards did I get, and like, what kind of deck do I have, and yeah. Mm-hmm. You do that at the library for sure.
And imagine, like, instead of YouTube Kids where they're being fed like weird ass algorithm stuff like Elsa murdering Spider-Man and or
AI generated color videos that are like just weird sounds and things calculated to keep children's attention.
Yeah, what if it was like children had the ability to access a streaming service that was curated by librarians who had children's interests in mind, that you could just like play as easily as going on YouTube? Seems to me like,
yeah, it'd be better.
A lot better. I don't know where the line on automation is here, but you can have books that read to children as well. I mean, you argue that something could be lost in that, but I could see a benefit in having a book that...
Yeah, I mean, one of the tools in the toolbox for sure.
See, that's why I like to say sufficiently automated instead of fully automated. Because in a fully automated society, children's books would always automatically read to them by default. Whereas I think that we might actually find it sufficient to draw the line somewhere before full automation.
Well, it's technically a fully automated society. You might even have another machine that the robot is reading to so that the kid doesn't have to sit there and be read to. That's automated as well. The machine reads the book to another machine, and then...
You can kick back, baby. Your job is covered.
So sick of always being read to. I just need a machine to be read to for me.
We're finally free. So yeah, you ask us, won't somebody please think of the children? And we say, yeah, we just did. Mic drop. Let's get out of here, man.
Children thought of, checked off, done.
But you're fronting on us? You ever seen someone think about children like this? Some sort of like hip hop street dancing battle, except instead of rapping or dancing, they're thinking about the children more eloquently and thoughtfully and meaningfully. Yeah, let's see you top that. This is an open challenge to all podcasts and podcasters. Let's see you think of the children better.
Yeah, I doubt anyone will be able to do it. But if they do, then that's great. That's how society moves forward. That
is great, but we got a real braggadocio. I think we should claim it right now. When it comes, like, if someone ever says think of the children, people should automatically think, damn, remember the time Seriously Wrong thought of the children? Like, no one's gonna think about the kids like that again for a while. That was dope. That was incredible.
Yeah, no, it definitely. I think we're gonna be at the top for a while.
Prove us wrong. Prove us wrong. Open braggadocio challenge to all podcasters, friends and enemies alike. Let's see you think of the children better.